With respect, companion, I'd ask that you and your friends muzzle that dog of yours. The howling coming from your Vaska has gotten out of hand.
It was you, wasn't it? I should have known better. Now look at me.
How can I help you?
Hello. Ah, look. A mortal. I see you have discovered my lair. Very well done for a creature of such low wit. I stand corrected, although perhaps you underestimate yourself. I would say one so sharp is at least deserving of the title half-wit. I am a wisp. Does that answer your question? No? Very well, I shall explain. Essentially, at the core of my being, I am a ghost. Or rather, the imprint of a living soul. I possess the personality and knowledge of the one I represent, but nothing more. Yet, unlike a ghost, I am corporeal. I can touch the world around me just as it can touch me.
As for how I came to be, that is its own tale. One of regret, betrayal, but most of all, stupidity.
I have no answer, no theory. It was near the end of my life. I was starving, filthy, my lips about to drink from the burbling rivers of madness. I was cold, so cold. My clothes were wet, and the frost was flooding in through the pockets of loose stone. It was then that I saw a boy. I cannot be certain if he was even real. He was skipping rocks against the wall, mumbling in a language that was not the common tongue. Somehow I understood. He asked me if I was his mother. When I told him no, he asked me if I wanted to be. And when I woke up the next morning, I was not cold anymore. Possibly. There are many wisps and wisp mothers who float about Skyrim, with only the shades to call children. Is the wisp's chime the sound of weeping for the lost? Or a melodic tune meant to attract a new child that she can steal away? I, however, have no desire to raise a litter of brats, and my song is meant only to frighten. I imagine it is much like your existence, only with thin wrappings for skin, glow dust for blood and a skull completely filled with air. In other words, I am corporeal. Permanently so. I am not like a familiar or any other flimsy image cast upon this world by a frightened idiot. Now, I will admit that when I first discovered the nature of my body, there was confusion. For so long I lived an existence full of lacking. I lacked food. I lacked warmth, in more ways than one. As a wisp, there was only one thing I lacked, and it more than made up for the rest. What I lacked was pain. Such a kind, maudlin, and dare I say cloying little sweetheart. You'll make this wisp mother cry a river of ectoplasm. Hopefully you'll drown in it. Aren't you the bright one? You figured out I wasn't an ordinary wisp mother, and you did so without the aid of pictures. Good for you. I cannot say for certain why I am still lucid, whereas others are not. Only that I believe it has something to do with this location. For all my life I wanted vengeance against those that wronged me, and it is that singular focus that brings thought to this one's partial existence. Who is to say what would happen if the object of that enmity, the very descendants of the one I despise, were to leave Whiterun for another hold? Your lust for blood is amusing, mortal. I would very much like to help in nurturing such a very desirable compulsion. Unfortunately, I have not waited countless millennia to have my vengeance handed to me on a dish not yet cold. I was once the daughter of Hjor, one of the early patrons of the great clan Battleborn. It was the time of Nordic kings, long before Ty the Septim made this land the vanguard of his empire. Yet my father was only a father by blood, and not by name. For my mother was one of the last of the snow elves, and their union was said to be a betrayal of both their people. If my father was to lead the clan to prosperity, my existence could not be known. So I was thrown into this dungeon, left here to rot through countless winters, through wars and famine. I was here as castles crumbled and were built anew, haunting these damp, fetid tunnels, as Olaf built Dragon's Reach and a new dungeon above it. What became of her I learned from the guards, who whispered stories from above. She fought for the Nords, they say, against her own kind. She killed hundreds of her own people, watched the genocide of an entire race, all for the love of a man who would never make her his wife. To put it simply, my mother had lost her mind. They say in the end she was killed by the beasts of the wild, having ventured too far from camp. She was killed by beasts, all right, but those that walk on two legs and smell of bad mead. They are not even memories. Pictures, maybe, of someone else. A young girl holding hands with a grown man. He calls her his little mountain flower and places one in her ear. They head on over to the market. He shows her one of the fish at the monger's stall. A salmon as long as a mortal's arm but as fat as a house cat. He lifts her on his shoulders so she can touch it. It wiggles a bit and she squeals, drawing her hand back. The man smiles. It was a conjuration trick. A touch of life. The man tells her she should be careful around the dead, for in Skyrim the dead never die. Sage advice indeed. so I've heard. There are no shortage of rumors that I'm privy to in this foul sewer. I wonder, as Alfred plots the demise of the Greymanes, if he even knows his son is in love with one. I also hear they are Legion pets, loyal to an empire led not by a dragon king, mind you, but high elves. What sweet irony. It brings me no shortage of joy to know my father's namesakes now defile his memory in this fashion. When indeed, mortal, for even now I hardly consider myself dead. In fact, I believe it is that very refusal to die that allowed me to continue wandering this plane. Living in this squalid pit with only the rats to serve as meals, the only motivation I had was to outlive my father. I lived for the day when he lay on his deathbed, summoning me to his chamber in hopes that I would absolve him of his betrayal. The dying always believe they can use their own deaths as a shortcut, a way to receive forgiveness from those they wronged in life. I vowed not to pity him when that moment came. I would spit in his face and let him greet the sun with a glob of milky white hanging from his beard. Only he never gave me the satisfaction. They never brought me to see him. It would not have mattered. I could hear the whispers through the grate. My father had forgotten, and I was already dead. Finally. Farewell now. Greetings. Farewell now.